Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk at this seminar. So the question is it relevant to index species of fishes in an inventory of food heritage? Of course, I will talk about the French inventory of food heritage, inventaire du patrimoine culinaire de la France. And it's not only a rhetorical question and a provocative question, it's mostly a question of methodology. Because I gave a talk a few weeks ago about poultry, and it was same issue at stake. I mean, this kind of inventory are about handmade products, and I don't think you can deal with living products like poultry or like fishes as you can deal with handmade products. So the methodology is for this kind of inventory is mainly conceived for handmade products. So I think it's complicated to include living product like fishes, for instance, as if it was a dish or any other kind of product. So we'll see first how this French inventory was conceived, the methodology which was followed for this collection of volumes. And then we'll see the problem which exists concerning fishes, which are including in this inventory. So first, I will present the inventory and the methodology, and then I'll talk about fishes in this work. So this work, this inventory of the French culinary heritage, was made started in 1989, and it was made on a regional basis, which means administrative regions, as they were before January 2016, because you may know it, I don't know, but there was quite an important reform in 2016, and now some of these regions you have here are fused. For instance, you have New Aquitaine, which includes Poitou-Charentes and Limousin. So now you have less regions in France, less administrative regions. But at that time, so it was a basis for the inventory. You had almost one volume of the inventory for one region, with some small differences, because you have 27 administrative regions. But for instance, you have only one volume of the inventory for Normandy there, and you also have one volume for the overseas region. So for each overseas region, as you can see on the map, Guyane, Guadeloupe, Martinique, and so on. So you have 24 volumes, and the thing is, the inventory was stopped for obscure reasons. I won't talk about it in the late 90s, which means that there is still one region which has not been indexed, which is the Réunion. You can see on the map, it's an island in the Indian Ocean. So the inventory took place from the late 80s to the early 21st century. Actually, my institute, Institut Européen d'Histoire et des Cultures de l'Alimentation, which is based in Tours, took part in the inventory of the Région Centre, in the very middle of France. So that's why I'm talking here. So this kind of inventory rely on a work by historians, by ethnologists, agronomists. Lots of people were involved in each region, maybe some around 30 people team in each region to make investigation I mean, investigation with the, all the people who work in the food industry and the food, all the craftsmen making food products, and of course some historical investigation. So it was a very long work for each region, of course, and a very thorough examination of every aspect of the question. So for each volumes, you have, it's a kind of, this inventory are a kind of, it's a series of cards in a way. For each product, it's a kind of card with always the same items, description of the product, history of the product, uses and expertise. For each product you find this structure of the card. As you can see, I'm not sure you can read it, it's a scan of pages of a volume, you know, for some pasta from Nice, for instance, here. And you see it's always the same structure for the card for each product. So, and you have 11 sectors of products, as you can see here: beverage, breads, confectionery, pastry, meat products, fruits, vegetables, fish and seafood, dairy produce, meat and poultry, and diverse others. So it's always the same methodology for each region that which is followed, and with I mean, in average, for each region, you have more than 100 products, 110, for instance, for the Région Centre. And the richest region is Rhône-Alpes. You see Rhône-Alpes, it's a region of Lyon, Savoy, and actually for French people, it's not a surprise that it's the richest region for food products. And with almost 200 products. And I think the smallest heritage, culinary heritage is in Limousin, where you have, I think, something like 60 products. So in average, more than 100 products by region. So these inventories are not about products. You have 6 criteria for, I was talking about methodology. So you need to have criteria to understand which kind of product you will keep in your inventory, of course. So you have 6 criteria. Marketing, which means that a product must be marketed. History, so the unofficial depth of history which has been kept is 50 years. A product must be marketed for at least 50 years in a specific region. So marketing, history, local. A product must be rooted in a specific area, and it must be, maybe not, this area must not be, is not necessarily the only place where you can find this product, but at least there must be a specific link between this area and the product itself. So local, fame, a product's fame or renown is linked to its area of influence. Continuity, the action of a technique on a material leads to the creation of a product with different characteristics, different features. And expertise, the product must be the subject of local expertise. So you have these 6 criteria and something else. In this inventory, first, wines are not included because we consider that there are already so much things written about wines. I mean, it's not necessary to have a new inventory of wine for any region. There is a kind of small part, introductory part in each volume about wine, but you don't have some specific cards for each wine in each inventory, first. And secondly, if a dish, if a product is only marketed in restaurant, it's not in the inventory, which means like some famous recipes like bœuf bourguignon, for instance, are not in the inventory because you consider you can do it at home, of course, or you can find them in restaurants, but actually we could discuss about it, but you can buy it in some market or thing like that. So if for products which are only prepared in restaurants, you don't have them in the inventory. So thanks to these criteria, as I said, for all region you have an average of 100, 110, like in Centre, Région Centre, products for each region. Which means that if you add all the region, you may have maybe 2,000, 2,500 products for all over France. Actually, this figure doesn't have much meaning because sometimes you have the same product in different regions. Sometimes in one region you have lots of differences for only one product. So that's it. Escape and then no. Escape, escape, escape. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so you have an average of 100 products and, for each region. So it's supposed to be, of course, the traditional products. And I could talk about the, how complicated it is to give very clear definition of what tradition is. So I guess in that case, that's the best way to apprehend, to catch what tradition is the intersection of all these criteria. But of course, it's a limited interpretation. It's very tricky to really to track down what traditional products are. For instance, even in the introduction of the inventory, it is said that, I quote, the criterion of continuity is, sorry. That even, for instance, I gave the, that the continuity is important criterion, but even in each volume, they said that this criterion is of continuity is to verify whether the techniques of making or producing a product have remained unchanged within acceptable limits of technical evolution, which means that even such a criterion as continuity, you may have a kind of gray area for which you must accept some transformation, of course. So I guess for each criterion, you have to deal with some change, with some gray area again. So the thing is, you have to give a definition of what tradition is when you make this kind of inventory, but of course it's always frustrating to try to catch what a traditional product is. So what is the place of fishes in this national inventory? I won't give the list of every fishes for each region, but some example you see for Alsace, the different fishes which has been kept, for instance, eel, pike, carp, herring fillet, zander, brown and rainbow trout, Aquitaine, shade, anchovy, eel, caviar, farm sturgeon, so on, sea lamprey, ever. And in some regions, you almost have no fish, as you can see for Auvergne or Burgundy. Brittany, Bretagne, of course, lots of fishes from sea, mostly. Région Centre, Corse, and so on. So, and for some regions, absolutely no fish, like for Franche-Comté and Île-de-France, which I'll come back to that later. So, can we see that? Can we consider that the fish which has been listed respect the criteria I mentioned? If we took the Alsace example, Alsatian example, pike, for instance. So if we consider fame, tradition, and the fact that it is still marketed, if we take pike, and if we take the pike card in the inventory, we can say in the historical, we can see in the historical part of the note that it is said that the pike is already on the aristocratic Alsatian table in the Middle Ages. You can see that any banquet in Alsace in 16th century, you had pike on the table, and they give some other, some precise example. For instance, one by the Bishop of Strasbourg, a feast given in 1507, where the pike were served with a blue sauce with herbs, and you have some books of recipe, some cookbooks in some Alsatian cookbooks in 17th century, and you have some pikes in several recipes. So because of that, and because it is still marketed, you can consider that pike, it's really traditional fish in the culinary habits of Alsace, and that's because of that, it's answered to the criteria that I gave earlier. If you take shad in Aquitaine, for instance, same thing. You have some reference in antiquity by Ausonius in the 4th century, saying that shad was very abundant in the area of Bordeaux at the time. And then you have some other occurrences of shad throughout history. In early modern period, you find shad eaten by aristocratic in Aquitaine around Bordeaux. So in the 19th century, you see peasants fishing shad as well. So you have this continuity, you have this tradition, this local tradition of fishing shad, and the presence of shad in culinary tradition locally. So, okay, it's not hard to understand why this kind of fish can be in the inventory for such or such region. But the thing is, we can be surprised that you have some region with no fish at all. I'll just take one example, for instance, Burgundy. You just have some small Saône, which is a river, Saône small fry. So some young fishes like barbs or obliques you can find in the inventory for Burgundy. So it's because some elements suggest that small fry was already important in local culinary heritage as early as the 14th century. So you have a kind of tradition, of course, and that nowadays the fishing of small fry is still important in Burgundy, in the Saône River. So you have, of course, the criteria are respected. But the thing, you also have another tradition in Burgundy, which is, I think there is no English word for that, matelote of fish, which is, you know, when you cook fishes in wine, and it's a very strong tradition in the culinary culture of Burgundy. And the thing is, to make matelote, to make this kind of wine preparation, you need some burbot, so lot de rivière, and which was fish by excellence for this kind of freshwater fish, which was used for this kind of dish. And it's one of the very important dish preparation in the local culinary tradition, which means by only mentioning small fry, you don't mention a very important ingredient of a very important dish of Burgundy. So there is no clear explanation why they had to not to include some other freshwater fish. The only kind of freshwater fish is small fry, but you can consider that some other fish are missing. And you can have the same remark about Auvergne, for instance. No, I don't. Auvergne, the same thing, or even for Franche-Comté. So we can be surprised that you don't have any fish, or at least just one in Champagne or Auvergne, and absolutely none in Franche-Comté. I think there is a problem here, not to have more freshwater fish. Another case for Brittany. For Brittany, you have a long list of fishes, of course. Brittany is, as you may know, is the seacoast province. And in the introduction of the fish chapter for Brittany, it is said that it is not easy because of the profusion of the fish sector in Brittany to always identify with precision what is tradition, precisely, about fish in Brittany, and what is specific to Brittany. So in the introduction they raise the problem, but actually they don't really answer this problem, and they don't really explain how they manage to identify what is tradition and what is not. When I'm talking about fish, of course, on what is specific to Brittany and what is not. And the thing is, in Brittany, I think you have here 12 species of fishes which has been kept in the inventory. But if you go to the Fishermen's Union of Brittany, they consider that 26 species are fished nowadays in Brittany. So it means that they left aside lots of species. And again, it is not really clear why and how they managed to decide what deserves to be in this list and what does not deserve. Another thing is, in the same introduction of the fish chapter in the inventory of Brittany, they call what they ask the question of, is there any terroir effect for fish? Which means, can you consider that some fishes fished in a specific area have, to put it shortly, a specific taste linked to the specific place? Which of course would be the best reason to have them, one of the best reasons to have them in this kind of inventory. And again, they give some example, but not especially about fish, but most about seashell like mussels or even more obvious oysters. But for fish, you can't really consider that there is this terroir effect, and it's also a problem because if the fish you fish in Brittany or in Aquitaine is the same, I mean, is it this the local criteria that I mentioned? Is it relevant in the case of fish? Of course. So I'm not sure it works in for this kind of product. You have, of course, another element linked to the tradition is the way the fishes are fished. For instance, you have in the list of Brittany, as you can see, the line-caught fishes, line-caught sea bass, line-caught mackerel, and so on. And you consider that it's not only a question of how fishes are fished, but also a question of the quality of the product. Because when it's a fresh fish caught just by a line, you can be sure the product will have a better quality than when it's fished with trawler, then kept in ice and sold a few days later. So there would be some other elements to give and some problem with the taxonomy of the inventory as well, but I'll make it short. So I think to answer my question, that to know if it's relevant to index as a conclusion, if it is relevant to index species of fishes in this kind of inventory, I would say no, actually. I would say no, because I think, and I would say the same about fruit, for instance, and I think even that what I said a few weeks ago, it was the same problem for other reason with poultry. I think this kind of inventory should only consider dishes, handmade products, and through this kind of approach, I mean, just to make the inventory of handmade products, you can identify some specific species used to make the recipes, to make the products. But to choose to have a specific list of species, I think, is not relevant for this kind of inventory. Thank you.